I need a fiancé tonight. Can you pull that off, or should I ask someone else? Weston Adler stood in front of her, 6 foot something and dressed like he walked out of a GQ cover shoot, his tone fast, clipped, and way too confident. Maren Dorsey blinked, unsure if she'd heard right. 1 second she was scraping whipped cream off a cafe counter during the worst double shift of her week. And now this man, this absolute stranger, was standing in front of her like he'd just ordered a fake engagement off the menu. "I'm sorry." "What?" she asked, frozen with a half-cleaned mug in her hand. Weston's eyes flickered to the clock on the wall behind her. "I've got a black tie gala in 3 hours. My ex is going to be there, and unfortunately, so is a very wealthy investor who's only interested in doing business with family men. I need to show up with a fiancé, someone smart, charming, believable. And you picked me because you dumped coffee on me last week, then told off a banker with a Rolex and zero personality. You're quick, and you don't seem like the type who's easily intimidated." Maren's stomach flipped. "You're serious? I'll pay you $10,000 for one night. Just pretend we're together, I'll handle the rest." She stared at him, sharp jaw, dark hair that curled slightly at the ends, blue eyes that didn't waver. He had the look of a man who was used to getting what he wanted not because he demanded it, but because people couldn't find a reason to say no. Still, she hesitated. "This sounds like a terrible idea." "I agree," he said, pulling a sleek black card from his wallet and sliding it across the counter. "But I'm out of options. 10,000, and I'll throw in a dress." Maren looked at the card, then back at him. Her rent was overdue. Her car was one weird noise away from breaking down. Maybe this was insane, but the way he looked at her like she was exactly who he needed made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she could pull this off. "One night?" she asked. "One night." "You'll never have to see me again." "Fine," she said, tossing the mug in the sink. "Just don't expect me to fall in love with you or anything." Weston's eyes softened just for a second. "Wouldn't dream of it." 3 hours later, Maren stood in front of a full-length mirror in a suite at the Ritz-Carlton, wearing a floor-length black gown that probably cost more than her entire apartment. It hugged her curves like it had been made for her, which Weston casually mentioned it had. He'd sent his personal stylist and a tailor the second she agreed. She turned as he walked out of the adjoining room, adjusting his cufflinks. He stopped when he saw her. "Wow," he said, his voice lower. Maren crossed her arms. "You're not going to start with cheesy lines, are you?" "No," he said, still staring. "I just didn't expect you to look like that." "Like what?" "Like someone I'd actually want to marry." Heat crawled up her neck, but she rolled her eyes. "You really commit to the role, huh?" He studied her for a moment, then offered his arm. "Let's go convince the world we're madly in love." The gala was held in a massive ballroom lined with gold-trimmed walls and crystal chandeliers. Soft violin music floated through the air, and guests in designer gowns and tuxedos sipped champagne from flutes that sparkled like diamonds. Maren leaned into Weston as they entered, her hand resting gently on his arm. He smiled, whispered, "You're doing great," and introduced her to a blur of important people with last names that sounded like luxury brands. She played her part. She laughed at his stories, touched his arm at the right moments, leaned in like she knew every inch of him, and somehow it felt easy. Then came the ex, tall, blonde, and dressed like a walking ad for old money. She sidled up with a fake smile. "Weston, didn't expect to see you here so soon, and with someone new." Weston's jaw tensed. Maren smiled sweetly. "Hi, I'm Maren, his fiancée." The woman blinked. "Fiancée?" "Yes," Weston said smoothly, pulling Maren closer. "We're getting married in the fall. It happened fast." The ex's eyes narrowed. "Interesting. I always thought you weren't the marrying type." "Guess you didn't know him as well as you thought," Maren said, her voice calm but sharp. The woman stalked off. Weston turned to Maren, stunned. "You're better at this than I expected." "You're not too bad yourself," she said, a little breathless from the rush. They made it through the rest of the night without a hitch. Investors smiled. People congratulated them. And somewhere between the champagne toast and the slow dance under the chandeliers, something shifted. Weston's hand rested on her lower back as they danced, his eyes locked on hers. "Tell me something real," he said suddenly. "Like what?" "Anything." "Something you wouldn't tell a stranger," she hesitated. "I've never had a real relationship, not one that didn't fall apart," he nodded, quiet. "Same." And just like that, the air between them changed. It wasn't just a game anymore. Back at the hotel suite, Maren stepped out of her heels, her body aching from the long night. She expected Weston to say a quick goodbye, hand her the check, and disappear. Instead, he stood by the window, staring out at the city lights. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For saving my night, for making it feel like—" He stopped. "Like what?" He looked at her. "Like it could have been real." Maren's breath caught. He stepped closer. "You were supposed to be fake. One night, no strings, but then you laughed at my jokes. You made me forget I was pretending, and now, I don't want to let you go." Her heart pounded. "Weston, I know it's crazy, but what if we gave this a chance?" She stared at him. "Are you saying this wasn't just an act for you?" "I'm saying I don't want a night to be the end." She didn't answer right away. She just walked over, stood on her toes, and kissed him slow, soft, and real. When she pulled away, she whispered, "Then don't let it be." The next morning, Maren woke in a bed that felt too large, too soft, and definitely not hers. For a moment, the room confused her floor-to-ceiling windows, dark marble floors, and a skyline that stretched forever. Then she remembered. "Weston?" She sat up slowly, the black silk robe he'd offered the night before sliding off her shoulder. The suite was quiet, but the faint scent of espresso drifted in from the hall. She padded barefoot toward the source, her pulse doing a slow, confused thud behind her ribs. In the open kitchen, Weston stood in a crisp gray shirt, sleeves rolled up, pouring 2 cups of coffee. He looked over his shoulder as she entered. "I wasn't sure how you took it," he said, sliding a cup her way. "So I guessed. No sugar, extra cream," she blinked. "How would you even know that? You stirred your coffee counterclockwise last week. The way you looked at the sugar like it was personally offensive gave it away." Maren took the cup, unsure what surprised her more, the fact that he remembered or that he noticed in the first place. "I should probably go," she said after a moment. "We said one night and I already stretched that." Weston leaned against the counter, watching her. "You don't owe me anything, but if you're leaving because you think I expected something more last night, I'm not. I just don't usually wake up in penthouses." He set his cup down. "Then maybe it's time you did." Her laugh came out sharper than intended. "Right. Because waking up in a millionaire's suite is a normal next step for a barista with 2 roommates and a broken radiator. You're not just a barista. And you're not just a man who needed a date." That stopped him. The air between them shifted again, quieter now. "You saw through all of it, didn't you?" he asked. "I saw someone who was trying too hard not to look like he cared what his ex thought." He exhaled, like she'd hit something he hadn't admitted out loud. "Maybe I was." Maren ran a hand through her hair, trying to ground herself. "What is this, Weston? Because if this is just you being grateful, I'm not interested in some pity fling." His jaw tightened. "You think I feel sorry for you? You're used to women who know how to play this game. The kind who can walk in heels for more than 4 hours and name-drop designers in their sleep. I'm not that girl." "Good," he said, his voice low. "Because that girl never made me forget what I was pretending." She froze. "I've spent the last 5 years building a company people said would fail," he continued. "I've lost friends, relationships, even my father stopped speaking to me for a year. But last night, when you looked at me like I wasn't a walking dollar sign, when you told that investor's wife you loved the way I snored, I started thinking maybe I got it all wrong." She stared at him, the silence pressing in. "I don't know what this is," Weston said. "But I know I don't want to go back to pretending last night didn't happen." Maren didn't respond. She couldn't. Her chest ached with 100 thoughts she didn't know how to say. He stepped closer. "Come to lunch with me. I have a shift at 3, then come with me now." "Just an hour," she hesitated. "I'll drive you to the cafe after. No helicopters, no penthouse suites. Just you, me, and a place where no one knows who we are. A strange, reckless part of her nodded before the rest could catch up. They ended up at a quiet garden cafe tucked between two art galleries in a part of the city she'd never been. No cameras, no designer gowns, just sunlight filtering through olive trees and a waitress who greeted Weston like an old friend. "You come here a lot?" she asked as they sat. He shook his head. "Only when I want to remember what it's like to breathe." Maren stirred her coffee, this time clockwise. "You said your dad stopped speaking to you," she said. "Is it still like that?" "No. He started talking to me again when Forbes ran a piece on one of my companies." "Apparently I was respectable enough to be family again," she frowned. "That sounds exhausting." "It is. That's why I like this place. The staff doesn't care how many zeros are in my account. They remember I'm allergic to shellfish and that I prefer sunflowers to roses." "No one prefers sunflowers to roses." "I do." She looked at him, really looked, and something in her chest shifted after they ate. Weston leaned back, studying her. "You ever think about starting over somewhere?" he asked. "Every day." "What's stopping you?" "Money, fear, and the fact that I still haven't figured out how to fix the radiator." He smiled, not a practiced, polished expression, but something real. "Then let me help. With the radiator, with all of it." Maren's heart thudded. "We barely know each other." "We know enough. I know you're stubborn and smart. I know you don't back down from snooty exes or investors who think money makes them powerful. I know you made me laugh when I forgot how." She looked down at her napkin. "And what do I know about you? That I'm still trying to figure out." He was quiet a second, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "What's that?" she asked. "Something I wrote last night. Just in case you walked away this morning." She unfolded it, her fingers trembling. Inside was a list, short, handwritten, precise. "Reasons to ask Maren to stay. She doesn't flinch when cornered. She makes me forget I'm alone in a room full of people. She sees through me and stays anyway." There were more, but Maren didn't read them. She didn't need to. She looked up, eyes burning, voice soft. "You're not pretending anymore, are you?" "No," he said. "I'm not." She folded the paper, tucked it into her bag, and stood. "I need to get to work. I'll drive you." As they walked to his car, something unspoken passed between them, not a promise, not yet, but a beginning, and beginnings, Maren realized, were sometimes quieter than endings, but far more dangerous. Maren didn't expect the black SUV waiting outside the cafe. She'd barely stepped off her shift when the driver opened the door and handed her a small envelope with her name written in neat, looping script. Inside was a card. No message. Just an address and a time, 8 o'clock. She glanced at the driver. "Is this from Weston?" He nodded once. "I was instructed to wait." She should have walked away. She should have gone home, kicked off her shoes, and tried to forget that a man like Weston Adler had ever looked at her like she was more than a last-minute solution. But instead, she climbed in. The address led to a private gallery nestled between two historic hotels. The building was minimalist white exterior, no signage, just a single valet who took the car with a knowing nod. A woman with a headset guided her inside, past a curtain of sheer black silk, into a room filled with soft lighting and only one other person. Weston stood in the center, alone, hands in his pockets, staring at a painting lit by a single spotlight. The piece was abstract, bold, wild strokes of crimson and slate against a stormy canvas. She stepped forward. "What is this?" He turned slowly. "It's called The Moment Before." "Before what?" "Before everything changes." Maren's heart gave a traitorous thud. "What am I doing here, Weston?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he nodded toward the painting. "This belonged to my mother. She bought it 2 weeks before she died, said it reminded her of chaos right before clarity. I didn't know you lost her. No one really does. She wasn't the kind of person who left behind a lot of noise. Just this painting and a letter I wasn't ready to read until last year." Maren stepped closer, drawn by the rawness in his voice. "What did the letter say?" "That I wasn't meant to live like my father. That building something real wasn't about numbers or appearances, it was about knowing what mattered and holding on to it." He faced her fully now. I brought you here because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, not since the gala, not since that cafe. I thought I could walk away. I can't. Maren folded her arms. You think one painting and a fancy venue is going to convince me to what? Fall into your world like I belong there? I don't want you to belong in it, he said. I want to build something new around you. She stared at him. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you don't fake affection. I know you're the only person who's challenged me without trying to impress me. I know that every second I spend away from you feels like I'm wasting time. The room hummed with silence. Maren turned to the painting again. You're offering something impossible. No, Weston said, stepping beside her. I'm offering something terrifying because it's not built on pretending anymore. She could feel his presence just inches away. What if this doesn't work? Then we tear down the lie and start over. As many times as it takes, her hands trembled. I'm not someone you can control with money or charm. I'm not trying to control you, he said. I'm trying to be honest with you for the first time in a very long time. Maren's voice was quiet. I don't want to be another beautiful mistake in your world. You're not. She turned to face him again, eyes searching. Then prove it, not with grand gestures, not with paintings or private galleries. Prove it with something real. He reached into his coat and pulled out a simple gold key. This is to a little place in Montauk. No staff, no cameras, no investors, just a kitchen that needs fixing and a porch that faces the ocean. I go there when I need to feel like a person again. I want you to come. She hesitated. Why me? Because I don't want to hide in that house alone anymore. She took the key slowly, her fingers brushing his. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. He didn't touch her, didn't push, just watched her leave with eyes full of something unspoken. Maren didn't sleep that night. She held the key in her palm until dawn, wondering what kind of man offered a future not with diamonds or declarations but with silence, space, and a door left open. The next morning, she called in sick for the first time in over a year. By the time she reached the edge of Montauk, the sky was the color of wet slate, and the house was exactly as he described, unassuming, quiet, with chipped paint and a porch swing that creaked faintly in the wind. Weston was already there, leaning against the railing in jeans and a faded gray sweater, a dog-eared book in his hands. He looked up when he saw her. No surprise, no smugness, just relief. You came, he said. Maren stepped onto the porch, the key still in her hand. I'm not promising anything. Good, he said, because I want you to choose this, not because it's easy, but because it feels like something you'd fight for. She watched him, the waves crashing distantly behind the house. I'm not easy to love, Weston. I don't want easy, he said. I want real. And for the first time, she believed him. The first day in Montauk passed without a single mention of the city. No phones buzzed, no staff hovered. The only sound was the low tide rolling across the shore and the occasional creak of the weathered porch swing when Maren couldn't sleep and stepped outside in the middle of the night. Weston didn't follow. He didn't try to fill the silence either. And somehow, that made her stay. On the second morning, she found him barefoot in the kitchen, elbow deep in flour and muttering under his breath about the difference between baking soda and baking powder. You bake now? She asked, raising an eyebrow as she stepped into the room. I'm attempting pancakes, he said. It's not going well. You could have just asked me. He looked over his shoulder. You were asleep. I didn't want to wake you. Why not? Afraid of seeing me before I've had caffeine? No, I didn't want to interrupt something peaceful. Maren blinked. You watched me sleep. I heard you exhale like you hadn't in years. I didn't need to look. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You're different here. So are you. They ate on the back steps, the pancakes uneven and slightly burnt, but she didn't complain. The ocean stretched out in front of them like a promise neither of them had made yet. He poured her orange juice and didn't ask what she was thinking, which was exactly why she said, What happens after this? He didn't look at her right away. That depends on what we want it to be. I don't belong in your world, Weston. Then let's build one that doesn't belong to anyone else. She stared at the waves. You're not afraid this will fall apart? I'm terrified, he said. but I'd rather risk something real than go back to pretending I already have everything. That night, a storm rolled in. Not violent, but steady wind tapping against the windows and water pooling beneath the porch steps. Maren stood barefoot in the living room, watching the trees bend. Weston entered behind her, holding a blanket in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. "Storms freak you out?" he asked. "No, they just make everything feel louder." He set the blanket down on the couch. "I used to love them. When I was a kid, I thought thunder sounded like the sky defending itself." She turned toward him. "And now I still kind of believe it." They sat on the couch, the storm outside an excuse to stay close. At one point, she rested her head on his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't breathe too loudly. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "I used to think love was supposed to hurt, that if it didn't twist your stomach or leave you second-guessing yourself, it wasn't strong enough." He didn't fill the silence that followed. Instead, he took her hand and laced their fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world. The next morning, Weston surprised her again, not with a lavish gift or a grand gesture, but with a project. He handed her a toolbox and led her to the detached garage. "There's an old Vespa in here," he said. "It doesn't run. I figured we could fix it." "Why?" "Because I want to build something with you that can't be bought." She opened the garage door. The Vespa was faded seafoam, rusted in places, but the seat was intact and the tires weren't flat. She glanced at him. "You know I've never fixed anything like this before." "I know," he said. "Neither have I." They worked for hours, covered in grease and laughter, arguing over spark plugs and watching YouTube tutorials. It didn't matter that they didn't finish. It mattered that they didn't stop trying. Later, while washing their hands in the outdoor sink, Maren asked, "Do you think this only works because we're hiding here?" "No," Weston said. "I think this works because for the first time we're not hiding from ourselves." On the fifth day, a letter arrived. No return address, no sender, just her name written in familiar block letters. Weston handed it to her without asking questions. Maren opened it slowly, her fingers trembling. Inside was a note from her landlord. Her apartment had been broken into. Nothing valuable taken because she didn't own much, but her room had been ransacked. The note included a sentence that made her stomach drop. "You may want to consider moving." She stared at the paper, then folded it neatly and placed it on the table. "You okay?" Weston asked. "I don't want to go back to that life." "Then don't. I can't just disappear." "Yes, you can," he said, voice steady. "You can start over anywhere you want, with anyone you choose." She didn't speak. Not until he added, "I want to be that person, Maren." "The one you choose." Her throat tightened. "You say that now, but what happens when the city pulls you back? When the board meetings start stacking up and your name is on some magazine cover, and I'm just the girl who doesn't know which fork to use at gala dinners?" "I'll teach you," he said. "And I'll remind you that none of it matters. Not the forks, not the covers. You're not a placeholder, Maren. You never were." She stood, paced the room once, then stopped in front of him. "I need one promise, anything, no more pretending, not for investors, not for appearances. If we do this, it has to be real, even when it's messy, especially when it's hard." Weston reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He didn't drop to one knee. He didn't give a speech about soulmates or fate. He simply opened the box and said, "Then let's make it real." Inside was a ring, simple, no diamonds, just a gold band with a single engraved word, "Stay." She covered her mouth, tears stinging her eyes. He stepped closer. "It's not a bribe, it's not for show, it's a reminder that I see you. That I want you, and that I'm not going anywhere." Maren took the ring, held it in her palm, and whispered, "Then you'd better be ready for a lifetime of burnt pancakes and rusted scooters." He smiled. "Only if you promise not to run when it gets quiet." "I won't," she said. "Not anymore." And when she slid the ring onto her finger, it didn't feel like the ending of something impossible. It felt like the beginning of something finally true. By the end of the week, the Vespa was still in pieces. The porch swing had been repaired with mismatched nails, and Maren's duffel bag remained unpacked in the corner of the sunroom. But what had changed, what had quietly, definitively shifted, was everything else. Weston started each morning by making coffee the wrong way, and Maren stopped correcting him. She liked the way he tasted mornings, like he was still learning how to slow down. She'd taken to humming while she worked in the kitchen, something she hadn't done in years, and he never interrupted her, not even once. They shared space like it was sacred, not performative. The air between them had stopped trying to prove anything, but the outside world was never far. Weston stood in the doorway one afternoon holding a manila envelope with a silver embossed seal. His expression was unreadable. "What's that?" Maren asked, peeling an apple over the sink. He handed it to her. "It's from my legal team. I didn't ask for it." She opened it cautiously. Inside were drafts of a press release, images of them from the gala, and a proposed narrative. A whirlwind romance culminating in a surprise engagement. A neat package to reassure stakeholders and polish Weston's public persona. "They want us to sell the story," she said, not asking. "They think it would boost investor confidence heading into the new quarter." She folded the papers without reading further and set them on the counter. "Are you going to do it?" "No." His voice was steady. "I called them after it arrived, told them I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations. I appointed a new interim CEO this morning." Maren blinked. "You're serious?" "I've been serious since the second you walked into that ballroom and made me forget everyone else was watching." She leaned against the counter, processing. "So, what now?" "Now I stop living a life curated by other people's expectations, and I figure out what it means to build something that actually matters." He stepped closer, not with urgency, but certainty. "I've spent years collecting things that looked impressive from a distance. But none of them ever made me feel like this." Maren's throat tightened. "Like what?" "Like I've finally come home." She reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his without hesitation. "You're not scared anymore." "I'm still scared. I'm just done letting fear make decisions for me." They didn't talk about the press release again. Weston burned it in the fireplace that night, and Maren watched the edges curl and blacken without a single ounce of doubt. They spent the evening wrapped in a blanket on the floor, the fire crackling beside them, and not once did either of them mention what came next. But next came anyway. The following week, Weston took her to a property just off the main road in Montauk. It was quiet, surrounded by wildflowers and tall pines. A modest house sat at the center, all wood and stone, with a glass wall that faced the sea. "I bought it years ago," he said, unlocking the door. "Never lived in it. I kept waiting for the right reason." He turned to her as the door creaked open. "I want to build something here, not just a life, a space, for you, for us, for whatever we become." "Are you asking me to move in?" she asked, her tone unreadable. "I'm asking you to choose this life with me. However long it takes, however messy it gets." She stepped inside, running her fingers along the unfinished beams and dusty counters. The floorboards creaked beneath her and the air smelled like cedar and salt. "I want to paint the kitchen walls soft yellow," she said quietly. "And put a record player in the corner." Weston smiled. "Done. I want to learn how to make bread, real bread, not the pre-mixed kind. I'll be your sous chef." She turned to face him, her eyes bright. "And I want to name the Vespa," he laughed, stepping closer. "Anything else? I want to wake up next to you, every morning, even when you forget to start the coffee machine." He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin. "Then stay." She didn't hesitate. "I already did." They moved into the house together a month later, after repainting the walls and fixing the leaky faucets themselves. Weston turned the spare bedroom into a studio for Maren, where she started designing her own line of hand-painted ceramics. She sold them at the local market on Saturdays, and Weston would always come by, pretending to be a customer but never leaving without buying something. He never returned to the boardroom. Instead, he opened a small community center in town, using his resources to fund art classes, music lessons, and small business workshops. People stopped referring to him as the billionaire, and started calling him Maren's partner, or the guy who finally fixed the West Road pothole. They adopted a dog from the shelter, a mutt with one ear that flopped and a bark that sounded more like a squeak. They named him Basil. The Vesper ran again barely, but they rode it every Sunday down to the cliffs, where Weston would pull out a thermos of coffee and Maren would sketch the landscape in quiet contentment. They never staged another gala appearance. There were no interviews, no magazine spreads. Just long walks, homemade pasta, and a life that felt exactly how Weston had imagined it might if he ever stopped pretending. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Weston brought Maren to the backyard where he'd set up a small table under a newly built pergola. String lights glowed above them and wildflowers spilled from a glass jar in the center. She raised an eyebrow. "What's the occasion?" He held out a small, unassuming ring different from the first. This one had a stone the color of sea glass and a band etched with the coordinates of their Montauk home. "I don't need a ceremony with guests or photographers," he said. "I just need you, as my wife, if you'll still have me." Maren didn't answer with words. She took the ring, slid it on her finger, and kissed him like she had all the time in the world. They married quietly 2 weeks later, barefoot on the beach, with Basil wagging his tail beside them and the waves clapping gently in approval. They built a life that didn't need to be announced. A love that didn't need to be performed, and every time Weston woke to the scent of Maren's hair and the sound of her laughter drifting through the house, he knew this was the only version of forever he'd ever wanted. He hadn't just fallen in love, he'd finally landed.